Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. The gel was cold against my stomach, but that was not why I was shivering. I watched the ultrasound monitor, waiting for the flicker of life I had dreamed about for 2 years. Instead, I watched Dr. Yolanda Hammond's face. In the 5 years I had been coming to her practice in Chicago, she had always been warm and chatty, telling me funny stories about her church choir or her grandson's obsession with dinosaurs. Today, she had gone silent. Her jaw was tight, and a small line had formed between her eyebrows as she stared at the screen, moving the probe slowly, back and forth, back and forth. "Dr. Hammond?" I tried to laugh, but it came out thin and nervous. "You are scaring me. Is something wrong with the baby?" She set the probe in its cradle and wiped her hands carefully, as if delaying what she had to say. Then she turned her chair to face me directly. Her eyes were serious, and something else, something closer to anger than concern. "Alana," she said quietly, using my first name the way she did when she wanted me to really listen. "There is no baby." My mind went blank for a moment. "Maybe I miscounted," I said automatically. "Maybe it is too early to see anything. My cycles have been weird. Maybe." "No," her voice was gentle but firm. "There is no pregnancy. But that is not the part that concerns me most. I need to ask you some questions, and I need you to answer as honestly as you can. How long have you and your husband been trying to conceive?" "About 2 years actively," I said, confusion washing over me. "Brandon and I decided we were ready, but nothing has been happening. That is why I came in today. I thought maybe you could run tests, figure out what is wrong with me." Dr. Hammond scooted closer on her stool, her movements slow and deliberate. "Alana, do you remember having any medical procedures involving your reproductive system about 7 years ago? Anything at all, surgery, laparoscopy, anything under anesthesia?" 7 years ago. I tried to push past the rising panic and focus. 7 years ago, I had just met Brandon Holt at a charity gala downtown. I had been running a marketing campaign for a nonprofit. He had been one of the major donors. He was charming, attentive, asking questions about my work like it genuinely mattered. Within 6 months, we were inseparable. Within a year, we were married in a ceremony that had our photos in a local lifestyle magazine. "No," I said slowly. "I have never had anything like that. Why are you asking me this?" Dr. Hammond turned to her computer, clicked twice, then rotated the monitor toward me. "Because, according to the records I requested from your previous physician, you had a tubal ligation 7 years ago at a private clinic in Dallas." The room tilted. "That is impossible," I whispered. "I would remember having my tubes tied. I would never agree to that. Brandon knows how much I wanted children. I have been talking about being a mother since college." "That is exactly what concerns me," Dr. Hammond said quietly. She pulled a folder from a stack and laid it on the counter. "When I reviewed your full medical history this morning, I saw records from a facility I had never heard you mention. The clinic is very exclusive, very expensive. The kind of place where confidentiality is everything and questions are not encouraged. The procedure notes list a tubal ligation. The consent forms have your name." I stared at the documents. My name was printed at the top. Below it was a swooping signature that looked like mine at first glance, but something about it felt off, like a forgery practice just enough to almost pass. "That is not my handwriting," I said, my voice shaking. "I did not sign that. I swear to you I did not." Dr. Hammond opened another folder and placed a form from her office beside the consent form. "I thought the same thing," she said. "So I compared this signature with the ones you have signed here over the years. The strokes are different. The pressure points are different. And there is something else." She pulled out a printed email. "The clinic confirmed to me that the procedure was scheduled and paid for by someone else. All follow-up communications were requested to go through him, not you." My stomach dropped. "Him?" I asked, but the answer was already crawling up my spine like ice. "The payment came from Brandon Holt," Dr. Hammond said. "Your husband." For a moment, I could not breathe. The fluorescent lights seemed too bright, the room too small. "Why would he do that?" I whispered. "Why would he do that to me and not tell me? Why would he decide that for me?" "That," Dr. Hammond said, "is a question you need to ask yourself and probably a lawyer. Alana, what was done to you, if it was without your informed consent, is not just unethical. It is criminal. I am legally obligated to report this. But before I make that call, we need to talk about your safety and what you are going to do next." I sat up slowly, clutching the paper gown around me. I would have known, I said, clinging to the last thread of denial. I would have felt something. There would have been pain, symptoms, some sign. Not necessarily, she said. It can be done laparoscopic with small incisions. If you were told it was something else, if you were sedated and not told the truth, you might not question it. Think back. About 8 months after you started dating Brandon, do you remember any illness, any procedure that seems foggy now? My mind raced back through years of memories, that early golden period when Brandon was perfect, and I was so in love I would have walked blindfolded into traffic if he told me the view was pretty. There was a bad flu, I said slowly. I got really sick one winter. Brandon insisted I see his private doctor, said she was the best. I remember being in and out of consciousness for a couple of days. I remember abdominal soreness after, but the doctor said it was from severe cramping. I felt my throat close. Oh my God, you think he did it then? Dr. Hammond put a hand over mine. Alana, listen to me very carefully. I am going to report this as required by law. But before anything moves forward, I want you to leave here and go somewhere safe, somewhere that is not your house. Do not confront your husband alone. Do not tell him you know. Call someone you trust. Then call a lawyer. I am going to write down a few names. I dressed in a daze, folding myself back into my jeans and blouse, as if I were stepping into someone else's life. In the waiting room, a pregnant woman sat with her hand on her swollen belly, humming softly to herself. Something inside me cracked. By the time I reached my car, tears were streaming down my face. Brandon's smiling face filled my phone's lock screen, a photo from our honeymoon in Miami. Everyone had said I was lucky. Lucky to have found a man like him. Lucky to have a beautiful house, a successful husband, a charmed life. My hands shook as I dialed. Pick up, Nadine, I whispered. Please pick up. Hey, girl, Nadine Ellis answered, her voice bright over the background noise of her office in downtown Chicago. What is going on? I was just thinking about texting you. I need you to meet me, I said. My voice sounded strange, too calm. Somewhere public. As soon as you can. The brightness vanished from her tone. Alana, what happened? I cannot explain it over the phone. Please. The coffee shop across from your building. I will be there in 15 minutes, she said. Do not drive if you are too upset. Pull over and call a ride if you need to. I am serious. 15 minutes later, Nadine slid into the chair across from me at the corner table of the cafe. Her locks were pulled back into a low bun, her blazer still sharp from work, but her eyes were all concern. Start from the beginning, she said quietly. Take your time. I told her everything. The silent ultrasound. The missing baby that had never existed. The tubal ligation I did not remember. The forged consent forms. The payment from Brandon. By the time I finished, my coffee had gone cold and Nadine's hands were clenched so tightly on the table her knuckles were white. That man, she said finally, her voice low and controlled. That man is not just controlling. He is dangerous. I do not understand why, I whispered. If he did not want children, he could have said so. We could have argued, negotiated, gone to counseling. Why go this far? Because it is not just about children, Nadine said. It is about control. About deciding what you are allowed to have, who you are allowed to be. She pulled a folded card from her wallet. Call the attorney right now. The one Dr. Hammond recommended. Put him on speaker. My hands were still trembling as I dialed the number. Patterson Law Group, a receptionist answered. How may I direct your call? Dr. Hammond told me to ask for James Patterson, I said. She said it was urgent. A moment later, a calm male voice came on the line. This is James Patterson. I understand Dr. Hammond referred you. I told the story again, my voice steadier now. James did not interrupt. When I finished, there was a pause long enough to make my heart race. Mrs. Holt, he said finally, what you have described is potentially medical battery, fraud, and possibly part of a larger pattern. I need you to listen carefully. Do not go home alone. Do not tell your husband anything about what you know. Can you come to my office this afternoon with your friend? Yes, I said. My friend Nadine is with me now. Good, he replied. Bring any documents Dr. Hammond gave you. I will rearrange my schedule. This cannot wait. James Patterson's office was on the 25th floor of a glass building that overlooked the Chicago River. The kind of place Brandon was used to walking into with easy confidence. I felt like an intruder, clutching the folder from Dr. Hammond against my chest. Nadine stayed so close beside me I could feel the warmth of her shoulder. James was in his early 50s, with salt and pepper hair, and the calm presence of someone who had spent years watching people's lives fall apart and then helping them stitch the pieces into something new. He listened to me one more time, asked precise questions, then spread the documents across his conference table like pieces of a puzzle. "This is bad," he said finally. "But the good news is there is a paper trail. Payments, clinic records, forged signatures. If what you are telling me is accurate, and I have no reason to doubt that it is, your husband has done something egregiously illegal. It may not be just about children. Have you noticed anything else over the years that seemed off? He has always insisted on handling our finances," I said slowly. "He told me it was easier if one person took the lead. He recommended his own doctor for me when my primary retired. He likes to know where I am all the time, but I thought it was just how he showed he cared." I swallowed. Maybe I did not want to see anything else. "Abusers count on that," James said. "Here is what we are going to do. Brandon is out of town, yes?" I nodded. "He is on a business trip in Houston. He is not back until late tomorrow night." "Then tonight is our window," James said. "You are going to go home with your friend, and you are going to search his home office. Quietly, carefully, with gloves." He slid a small box across the table, latex gloves, a portable scanner, a flash drive. "You will photograph and copy everything that mentions your name, your medical history, insurance policies, or unusual financial arrangements. Do not remove original documents unless I tell you. We do not want him to know what we have yet. Then you pack a suitcase, and you do not sleep in that house again. Nadine, can she stay with you?" "She is not spending one more night in that house," Nadine said flatly. "Of course she is staying with me." "Good," James said. "I will also file for emergency orders first thing in the morning, protection orders, motions to freeze joint accounts. But first we need evidence. Alana, can you do this?" I thought about my house, the one with the perfect landscaping and the open-concept kitchen I had picked tile for like it meant something. I thought about Brandon, his measured voice, his reassuring hand at the small of my back. The man I had trusted with my life had carved out my future without my consent. "Yes," I said. "I can do it." Brandon's home office was on the 3rd floor of our house in Bronzeville, a big, glass-walled space I had been in maybe a dozen times in 5 years. He called it his command center. I had once thought that sounded charming. At 2 o'clock in the morning, standing in the doorway wearing borrowed leggings and latex gloves, it felt like walking into enemy territory. "You sure you are ready?" Nadine whispered beside me. "Ready enough," I said. "Let us start with the desk." The drawers were locked, of course. But that afternoon James had introduced us to a security consultant who spent an hour teaching us how to pick simple locks. My hands shook, but the mechanism clicked open with a soft sound that seemed almost obscene in the quiet house. Inside were neat rows of file folders. "Start with anything that has your name," Nadine murmured. The first folder was labeled with my full name, Alana Brooks Holt. Inside were medical records. Not just the usual copies from yearly checkups, but records from doctors I had never heard of, prescriptions I did not remember taking. My supposed history of anxiety. A 3-year string of anti-anxiety medications I had never knowingly swallowed. "Brandon gives me vitamins every morning," I said numbly. "He lines them up on a little white dish. He says he reads all the research, picks what I need so I do not have to worry about it." "We are taking every one of those bottles to be tested," Nadine said. She snapped photos of every page while I held them flat. The next drawer held financial documents. Life insurance policies. 5 of them. All in my name. All listing Brandon as the sole beneficiary. The totals made my stomach turn. $20 million, I whispered. "If I die, he gets $20 million plus everything else." "And look at the dates," Nadine said, leaning over my shoulder. "The first one is 6 months after your wedding. The most recent one is last month." I snapped photos until my phone's storage warned me it was full, then switched to the portable scanner. The more we found, the worse it got. There were documents I had no memory of signing that supposedly transferred my marketing firm to a trust Brandon controlled if I died. There were notes about my parents' estate, down to the value of my mother's jewelry. It was like someone had compiled a complete dossier on me. And then I found the other folders. 7 of them, each with a different woman's name written on the tab. Inside each was a similar collection of records, birth certificates, financial histories, photos, background checks. One had a red X scrawled across the front. When I opened it, a newspaper clipping fell out. A smiling woman named Helen Jackson looked back at me from the article about her tragic accidental drowning in a backyard pool in suburban Dallas 3 years earlier. "Nadine," I whispered. "He has done this before." She stared at the photo, then at the file. "We need to show this to James," she said, her voice shaking. "All of it. Every single page." The last drawer we opened held a leather-bound journal. Not a planner, but a personal journal with Brandon's handwriting on the first page. I flipped to an entry dated months before we met. "My father says it is time to marry," it read in sharp, slanted script. "He wants a match that benefits the family business. I do not want the complications of a real marriage. I need someone manageable, with no close family, someone whose absence will not raise too many questions. A clean profile." I flipped to an entry dated the month we met at the gala. "Met a promising candidate at the Brennan Foundation event. Name Alana Brooks. Marketing executive. Parents deceased. No siblings. Few close friends. Self-made. Intelligent. Beautiful. Most importantly, isolated. She could be ideal." My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the journal. The entries that followed charted his courtship like a business project. How he built trust, how he suggested I let him handle finances to reduce stress, how he pushed his preferred doctors. An entry from 6 months ago made my blood run cold. Insurance in place. Medical records establishing declining health documented. Timeline nearly complete. Another 6 to 12 months to avoid suspicion. Father impatient but understands precision is essential. I closed the journal with a snap and forced myself not to scream. "We are done," I said. "We have enough. I am not sleeping here again." We packed quickly. Nadine made me take the journal, copies of the files, and every bottle of pills and vitamins Brandon had ever given me. I moved through the bedroom like a ghost, shoving clothes and a few important keepsakes into a suitcase. A photo of my parents, my grandmother's bracelet, a box of recipes in my mother's handwriting. Everything else suddenly felt like props on a stage I had never realized I was standing on. By 7 in the morning, we were back in James's conference room, a mountain of documents and pills spread across the table. He went through everything with the methodical fury of a surgeon cutting out a tumor. With each page, his expression grew darker. "This is not just about you," he said finally. "This is an organized pattern. The other women, the life insurance policies, the clinic, the forged consent. That is a conspiracy to commit fraud at minimum, and given the prior deaths, quite possibly murder." "Helen Jackson," I said, touching the clipping with my fingertips. "Do you think he?" "I think the police in Dallas are going to want to reopen her case," James said. "But first we secure you. I am filing for an emergency protection order, freezing joint accounts, and notifying law enforcement about the clinic. You are not to contact Brandon. Do you understand? Every communication goes through me." Nadine rested a hand on my back when my breathing hitched. "She understands," Nadine said. "And she is staying with me. We will get a security system installed today." "I am also recommending private security," James added. "This was not a spur-of-the-moment decision for your husband. He has been planning for years. People who plan like that do not accept the collapse of their plans quietly." That night, at Nadine's apartment in Hyde Park, the weight of it finally hit me. I sat on her couch and sobbed so hard my chest hurt. 5 years, I choked out. 5 years of my life with a man who thought of me as a project. A payout. "You are more than what he tried to do to you," Nadine said, pulling me into a hug. "You are brilliant and stubborn and kind. You built your firm from nothing. You survived losing your parents and still graduated at the top of your class. You will survive this too, and he will not get away with it." My new phone buzzed on the coffee table. James had insisted on it that afternoon, a clean device the security consultant had personally checked. Still, my stomach clenched when I saw Brandon's name on the screen. We had not yet transferred the number. It was the same one he had always called. I stared at it ringing until it went to voicemail, then listened with Nadine sitting beside me. "Alana," Brandon's voice said, smooth and warm as ever. "Flight landed early. I am on my way home. Miss you. Cannot wait to hold you. Love you more than anything." I deleted the message without saving it. Everything he had said before had been a lie. There was no reason to believe that had changed now. The next day, James's security consultant arrived at Nadine's place with a small team. They swept her apartment and found 2 bugs. One hidden in the living room lamp, another under the dresser in the guest room where I was staying. My laptop and old phone were riddled with tracking software. "He has been monitoring everything," I said, numb. Emails, searches, calls. He probably knew what time I went to the bathroom. Not anymore, the consultant said grimly. He put my old devices into metal bags. These are evidence now. You will get used to new ones. Over the next 48 hours, everything moved at a dizzying pace. James filed motions. The judge signed an emergency protective order. Joint accounts were frozen. The clinic was placed under investigation, and a warrant was issued for access to Brandon's office computer systems. When Brandon was finally served with the divorce papers and the protective order at his downtown office, James called me. He did not take it well, he said. The process server reported that he tried to call you immediately. When he could not reach you, he called my office and threatened to ruin you financially. We are documenting everything. Do not panic. This is what men like him do when their control slips. They rage. Is he going to try to hurt me? I asked quietly. We are assuming he might, James said. That is why private security will be with you and Nadine at all times until further notice. We are not giving him an easy opportunity. We thought we had anticipated his moves. We were wrong. A few days later, Nadine and I sat at her dining table, going through the documents we had copied when James called. We found something on his laptop, he said. You need to see this in person. Can you come to the office now? 10 minutes later, we were staring at a slideshow of photos on James's screen. Brandon at charity events. Brandon at business dinners. Brandon on what looked like a yacht, arm around a woman I had never seen in person but now felt like I knew intimately. That is Rochelle Montgomery, James said. Daughter of Reginald Montgomery, hotel magnate. Old money. She and Brandon co-own 3 investment companies together. Rochelle was stunning, long waves of hair, a razor-sharp smile, eyes that seemed to assess and dismiss everything at once. In picture after picture, she stood close to Brandon in ways that made my stomach twist. Some of the photos were dated from before I met him. Some were recent, including one from 2 weeks earlier when Brandon had sworn he was in Austin for a tech conference. The metadata on the photo put them on a boat off the coast of Miami. She is not just his mistress, I said, throat tight. She is his partner. James clicked to an email thread. More than that, he said. The first email was from Rochelle to Brandon 8 years earlier. I have someone perfect, it read. She fits all your criteria. Self-made. No close family. Clean background. I can arrange an introduction at the Brennan Gala next month. I stared at the words until they blurred. My meeting with Brandon had not been an accident. It had been an introduction. A setup. I had walked into the script they wrote for me without ever seeing the pages. Who is her father, exactly? Nadine asked, her voice clipped. James pulled up a news article. Reginald Montgomery, he said. Owner of a luxury hotel chain with properties in New York, Chicago, Miami, Los Angeles, and Atlanta. Several investigative pieces have linked him to money laundering and organized crime, but nothing has ever stuck. Nadine exhaled sharply. So, your husband did not just come up with this plan on his own, she said. He had a playbook. As if on cue, James's assistant knocked and handed him a file. We got a call from a former employee at the clinic, she said. He wants to talk. His name was Lionel Davidson, a nurse who had worked at the Dallas clinic for 8 years. Rachel Owens, one of James's investigators, met him at a coffee shop while I watched from a parked car with tinted windows across the street. When Rachel returned, she slid into the driver's seat and closed the door before speaking. He kept records, she said. Personal ones. Every time something felt wrong, he wrote it down. He has a list of at least 15 women who had procedures they did not fully consent to. Some of them died under mysterious circumstances later. Several of their husbands or fiancés have financial ties to Montgomery businesses. So this is not just Brandon and Rochelle, I said. It is entire operations. Exactly, Rachel said. And Lionel is willing to testify in exchange for protection. He says he is afraid of what the Montgomery family will do to him if they find out he talked. Over the next weeks, the case expanded like ink in water. Lionel's records helped authorities identify other victims. One of them was a woman named Patricia Green, whose husband had tried to run the same scheme, but failed when she went to a different doctor for a second opinion. She had secretly recorded multiple conversations in which her husband and Rochelle discussed dosages of medication and timing the accident. Listening to those recordings made my skin crawl. Rochelle's voice was crisp and detached, calmly planning someone's death like a logistics problem. The prosecutor assigned to the criminal case, Angela Price, met us in James's conference room one afternoon, her briefcase bulging with files. "We have enough to move," she said. "We are charging Brandon Holt, Rochelle Montgomery, several clinic physicians, and 3 executives connected to Montgomery entities with conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and a host of related crimes. Reginald Montgomery is being named as an unindicted co-conspirator for now, while we build the larger case. This will not be quick, and it will not be easy. But we are moving. What happens to me?" I asked. "And Nadine?" "You are our key witness," Angela said. "And you are a target. We are recommending the U.S. Marshals put you in a witness protection program once the arrests are made. Nadine can enter with you if she chooses." Nadine did not hesitate. "Where she goes, I go," she said. "We have been family since freshman year. We are not stopping now." 2 weeks later, the news showed Brandon being led out of his office building in handcuffs, his usually flawless suit wrinkled, his face pale. Rochelle was arrested at a penthouse in downtown Miami. Footage of her being escorted to a waiting car played on every national network. Reginald turned himself in with a team of lawyers at his side, glaring at the cameras as if the whole thing were an inconvenience. Bail was denied for Brandon and Rochelle. They were officially accused of conspiring to murder their spouses and partners for profit. That night, the U.S. Marshals gave me a new name and a new life. Alana Brooks became Hannah Foster on paper, a pharmaceutical sales rep who had recently relocated to a mid-sized city outside Indianapolis. Nadine became Rebecca Ellis, my college roommate and best friend. We moved into a safe house in a quiet suburb, a one-story ranch with beige walls and neutral furniture that felt like the inside of a witness protection brochure. Learning to answer to a new name was harder than I expected. At the marketing firm where the Marshals had arranged legitimate jobs for us, people called me Hannah and asked normal questions about my move from Portland. I smiled and repeated the cover story until it began to feel like another kind of script. At night, when the house was quiet and the security cameras blinked their little red lights, I would whisper my real name to myself, just to remember it. "This is temporary," Nadine said one evening as we ate takeout on the couch. "Once the trial is over and they are sentenced, you can reclaim everything. We will go home. Maybe not to the same neighborhood, but to our real lives." "What does that even mean now?" I asked softly. My real life was built with a man who thought my death was a business decision. Before we could figure that out, I had to face him. During pretrial motions, Brandon's lawyers tried to suppress the journal, the life insurance polices, the clinic records. Angela fought every motion, armed with Lionel's notes and Patricia's recordings. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling hearing, my new phone rang. An unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. Instead, I answered. "Hannah," the caller said, then corrected himself. "Alana." It was Brandon. My stomach lurched. "Please do not hang up. You are violating a court order by calling me," I said. My voice came out calmer than I felt. "I know," he said. His voice sounded rougher, thinner, as if the steel had been scraped off it. "I just need 5 minutes. I need you to understand that I did not mean for it to get this far." I almost laughed. "You paid for a secret surgery to take away my ability to have children," I said. "You took out $20 million in life insurance on me. You kept a journal about the best way to time my death. How far did you think it was going to go?" There was a long pause. When he spoke again, the desperation was gone. "You have no idea what you are up against," he said quietly. "The Montgomery family does not forgive. They do not forget. Take a settlement and disappear. I am trying to help you, Alana." "Is that a threat?" I asked. "It is a warning," he said and hung up. The Marshals traced the call to a burner phone and added another count of violating the protective order to his charges. That night, security at the safe house doubled. Angela met with us over video, her expression grave. "We expected some intimidation attempts," she said. "We did not expect them this early. They are rattled. That works in our favor in court, but it increases risk now. We will move you to a second safe house in a more rural area." The new place was outside Columbus, at the end of a long, tree-lined road, with only one way in and out. We spent the days preparing for trial, going over my testimony with Angela until I could recite it even half asleep. At night, nightmares woke me, a hand pushing my head underwater, a scalpel cutting through skin, Brandon's voice whispering that I was overreacting. The day I testified, the Marshals escorted me through a side entrance of the federal courthouse back in Chicago. My hands were damp, my legs unsteady. When I stepped into the courtroom and saw Brandon for the first time in months, it felt like stepping onto the edge of a cliff. He looked smaller somehow, thinner, the sharp lines of his face softened by worry. Rochelle sat at a separate table, immaculate in a navy suit, eyes cold, expression unreadable. In the back row, Reginald watched with simmering fury, as if he could burn the whole courtroom down by glaring at it. Angela's questions started gently. Where did you grow up? How did you meet Brandon Holt? How would you have described your marriage before the ultrasound? The basics. The foundation. Then she led me through the turning points. The ultrasound, the revelation of the surgery, the forged consent, Brandon's payments, the home office, the journal. What went through your mind when you read the journal entry describing you as isolated and ideal? Angela asked. I realized my entire marriage was a lie, I said. Every romantic gesture, every surprise vacation, every I love you. It was all part of keeping me compliant and unaware. I was a project, not a partner. A payout waiting to happen. Brandon watched me with wide, glistening eyes, shaking his head infinitesimally, as if trying to will me to stop. I kept my gaze fixed on the jury instead. 12 strangers, 12 possible futures. Cross-examination by Brandon's lawyer was worse. He tried to suggest I had consented and forgotten, that I had known about the life insurance and welcomed it, that I was motivated by money and revenge. I answered every question with the same calm, stubborn truth. No, I did not consent. No, I did not know. No, I did not want his money. I wanted my life. When I finally stepped down from the stand, my legs were trembling so badly I thought I might fall. In the witness room, Nadine hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. You did it, she whispered. You told them everything. Over the next 3 weeks, the jury heard from other victims, from Lionel, from Patricia, from Calvin Jackson, the widower of Helen. Calvin described how his wife's health had mysteriously declined after she started seeing the same private Dr. Brandon had used. How she had drowned in their pool the night after Rochelle and Brandon had come for dinner. How every attempt he made to push for deeper investigation had been shut down. Patricia played her recordings. Rochelle's voice filled the courtroom, clipped and efficient as she discussed increasing dosages, scheduling episodes so they would seem plausible. The jury watched Lionel break down on the stand as he described holding hands with sedated women who thought they were getting minor procedures, not irreversible surgeries. When the case went to the jury, Angela told us it could take days. They were back in 6 hours. Guilty on all counts for Brandon, Rochelle, and Reginald. Conspiracy to commit murder. Insurance fraud. Medical battery. Witness intimidation. The judge denied bail pending sentencing. For the first time since the ultrasound, I felt like the ground under my feet might actually hold. The sentencing hearing a few months later was surreal. I sat in the front row beside Nadine and Patricia. The judge read out the penalties like a litany. Life without parole for Reginald. 45 years for Rochelle, no parole for 30. 20 years for Brandon, eligible for parole after 15, plus additional time for the later discovered cases, effectively ensuring he would spend at least 35 years behind bars. Do you wish to make a statement? The judge asked Brandon. He stood and looked at me. I want to apologize, he said, voice breaking. To Alana, to the families of the victims. I chose money over morals. I became a man I do not recognize. I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends by helping the authorities with any remaining investigations. His words slid over me and away. Whether he meant them or not was no longer my concern. He was going to prison. That was enough. After the criminal case came the civil ones. James filed suit against the clinic, against Brandon's estate, and against the Montgomery family holdings. The clinic's records, combined with Lionel's notes, made it impossible for them to claim ignorance. A jury awarded me and the other women millions in damages. The clinic filed for bankruptcy within a week. Brandon's assets, once frozen, were carved up like a pie, some for government restitution, some for victims. My portion, after legal fees, was close to $3 million. The Montgomery estate was the hardest to crack. They had hidden assets in shell companies and layered trusts across several states. For months, their lawyers fought every request for information, filed endless motions, and tried to paint me as complicit. It might have stayed tangled forever if Rochelle had not asked to see me. Absolutely not, James said when the request came from her attorney. She is a manipulator. She will try to get in your head. Maybe, I said. But she also knows where the money is. We met in a small room at the women's prison outside Joliet. Rochelle walked in wearing an orange jumpsuit, her hair pulled back, no makeup, cuffs on her wrists. Without the armor of luxury, she looked smaller, younger, but her eyes were the same, sharp, assessing. "Thank you for coming," she said, sitting across from me. Guards watched from the corners. Everything was recorded. James and Patricia sat at my side. "You have 5 minutes," I said. "Use them well." Rochelle's lips twitched, almost a smile. "I wanted to say I am sorry," she said. "I know you do not believe me, and I do not blame you. I picked you because you fit the profile. You were a spreadsheet to me, a risk category. I did not think about your humanity. That is on me. I am paying for it every day." "You are not paying what Helen did," I said. "Or the other women who died. They paid with their lives. You are paying with time." Rochelle flinched. "You are right," she said. "I cannot make that right. But I can help tear down what my father built. I know where the assets are hidden. I know how he laundered the money. I will testify in your civil case. Not for leverage. I do not have any left. For whatever is left of my conscience." James studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. "If you cooperate fully," he said, "we will support any motion you make for reduced restrictions inside. That is the best we can offer. The rest is up to the courts." Rochelle kept her word. In depositions, she described every shell company, every hidden account, every property held in the name of a consultant who did not actually exist. Her testimony, combined with financial forensics, led to a sweeping judgment. The Montgomery estate was ordered to pay tens of millions in damages to the victims. My portion was $12 million. Combined with the earlier awards, my total compensation was just over $20 million. It was more money than I had ever imagined having, and it made my skin crawl. It felt like money soaked in blood. "What are you going to do with it?" Nadine asked one night as we sat on the balcony of my new apartment in Chicago, the skyline glittering around us. "I cannot let it just sit there," I said. "I want to build something that directly counters what they did. They used money and power to trap women. I want to use money and power to help women get free." That was how New Dawn Foundation was born. We rented a modest office on the south side, painted the walls bright teal and gold, and hired a small staff: an attorney, a counselor, a social worker, a part-time nurse. New Dawn provided legal support, emergency funds, housing referrals, and medical advocacy for women leaving manipulative or dangerous relationships. Nadine left her corporate marketing job to run operations. Patricia joined our board and helped us design programs based on what we wished we had had when we were in crisis. The first time a woman sat in our office and said, "My partner insists on coming to every doctor appointment. He will not let me see anyone but his cousin who is a doctor. He handles all the insurance." I felt a cold rush of recognition. We helped her get a second opinion, separate accounts, a safe place to stay. She left him within a week. Therapy with Dr. Morrison, a trauma specialist Angela had recommended, helped me unpack the layers of grief and anger that still clung to me even as New Dawn grew. In one session, I handed her a letter that had arrived from prison, forwarded through James's office. It was from Brandon. "He says he is helping prosecutors with additional cases," I told her. "He says prison is where he belongs, and he thinks about me every day. He says I saved lives by fighting back." "How do you feel reading that?" Dr. Morrison asked. "Tired," I said honestly. "Too tired to hold his guilt for him. I am not going to write back. He can do his soul-searching without me." Healing was not linear. Some days I would go hours, then days without thinking about Brandon or Rochelle. Other days, a news article about a domestic violence case or a scene in a television show would send me spiraling back into medical rooms and courtrooms. Dr. Morrison reminded me that this was normal, that trauma does not disappear, it becomes part of the story you carry. 2 years after the trial, New Dawn had expanded to 3 cities with satellite offices in Milwaukee and Detroit. A national magazine ran a feature about our work. Donations poured in. We added a medical advocacy program where trained volunteers accompanied women to appointments, helping them ask questions and understand consent forms. We launched support groups, a hotline, and a small scholarship program. Somewhere in the middle of all that, I realized I had forgotten how to rest. I was living in reaction to my past, trying to outrun it by helping as many women as possible. Dr. Morrison gently suggested a sabbatical. "You have been fighting for years," she said. "You are allowed to live." I took 3 months and traveled. only within the United States, because my passport situation was still tangled with legal proceedings. But that was enough. I hiked Red Rock trails near Sedona. I walked along the river walk in San Antonio at night, watching reflections of lights dance on the water. I spent a week in Honolulu, standing in warm waves and letting the ocean wash over my ankles as the sun went down in streaks of orange and purple. I wandered through the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, staring at paintings for so long that the guards probably thought I was lost. In a small art studio in Denver, I signed up for a beginner's painting class on a whim. The instructor told us to paint how it feels to breathe after crying. My hand moved almost of its own accord, deep blues layered with streaks of white and sudden, sharp lines of gold. When I stepped back, I saw myself there, the heaviness, the cracks, the light trying to break through. "You have something to say," the instructor told me. "You should keep painting." When I returned to Chicago, I did something that felt both terrifying and necessary. I stepped back from New Dawn's day-to-day operations. Nadine and Patricia took over as co-directors. I stayed on the board, but my days were suddenly my own. I rented a small studio space in a converted warehouse in Houston, after deciding I needed a city where I had never lived with Brandon, and filled it with canvases, paint, and plants. I painted every day, sometimes angry abstracts, sometimes quiet, layered pieces that felt like whispers. 3 years after the ultrasound, a gallery owner in Houston offered me my first solo exhibition. We called it Reclamation. The paintings were mostly in deep blues and greens, with flashes of gold and white, a visual arc from drowning to surfacing to breathing again. On opening night, people wandered through the gallery, tilting their heads, murmuring to each other. I stood off to the side with a glass of sparkling water, anonymous, listening. "This one feels like getting your life back," a young woman said in front of a piece where thick, dark strokes were cut through with bright, almost violent ribbons of color. Like everything was heavy, and then suddenly there was light again. I smiled and introduced myself. "I am Alana," I said. "The artist." Her eyes widened. "I know you," she said. 2 years ago, I came to New Dawn. My husband controlled everything. My bank account, my medical appointments, even what I wore. Your foundation helped me leave. I saw your name on the flyer for this show and had to come." We talked for a long time about how her life had changed. She had her own apartment now, a job she loved, a dog that snored loudly enough to scare away nightmares. When she asked if I still thought about what had happened to me, I answered honestly. "Sometimes," I said. "But it does not own me anymore. I choose where I put my energy now. Right now, I choose this." I gestured to the paintings, to the room full of people looking at my work. The appeals from Brandon, Rochelle, and what remained of the Montgomery legal machine came and went, all denied. New Dawn continued to grow. We opened offices in Atlanta and Charlotte, cities that had requested our programs repeatedly. I created a scholarship fund, $10 million for my settlements, for women who had survived intimate partner abuse and wanted to pursue education or creative careers. 5 years after the ultrasound, I had a second exhibition in the same Houston gallery. We called this one Forward. The colors were brighter, yellows, corals, shimmering white streaks. A critic wrote that my work had shifted from survival to celebration, that the new pieces radiated hard-earned joy. On opening night, the gallery buzzed with conversation and laughter. Nadine was there, bouncing her toddler daughter on her hip. Patricia flew in from Chicago with her wife. James and his husband surprised me by showing up unannounced, grinning like proud uncles. And Dr. Hammond came. She walked slowly around the room, studying each painting with a clinician's focus. When she reached me, she pulled me into a hug. "Look at what you have done," she said, gesturing around us. "You took the worst violation I have ever seen in my career and turned it into this. A life, a movement, art. That is not just survival, Alana. That is victory." Later that night, back in my apartment, I stood by the window and looked out over the city lights. My journal lay open on the kitchen table. I picked up my pen and wrote, 5 years ago, a doctor told me there was no baby and no choice, that someone I loved had stolen my future without my consent. Today, I stood in a gallery surrounded by people who chose to be in my life, celebrating a future I built myself. Brandon was still in prison, teaching financial literacy classes to other inmates, according to one of James's updates. Rochelle was counseling other women inside, trying to carve meaning out of the wreckage she had helped create. Reginald had died behind bars, the obituary in the paper listing only his business achievements. never mentioning the women whose lives he had destroyed. None of that defined me anymore. I turned away from the window and looked around my home. Plants spilled over their pots. My own paintings hung on the walls. Stacks of books sat beside a guitar I was still learning to play. There were photos of people I loved. Nadine's daughter with frosting on her face, Patricia laughing mid-sentence, Calvin and his new wife smiling at a memorial for Helen where we had planted a tree in her honor. This was my life. Mine. The story Brandon tried to write for me ended with an insurance payout and a quiet obituary. The story Reginald tried to write ended with another woman swallowed by water or pills or complications. I had written something else instead. A life full of color and work that mattered, of friendships that felt like family, of women walking into New Dawn's offices and walking out with plans instead of fear. That was my revenge. Not their prison sentences, though those mattered. Not the settlements or the headlines. My real victory was simple. I was free. I woke up every day and chose my own life. I painted, I worked, I loved, I laughed. I lived on my own terms. And that, after everything they had tried to take, was everything. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.